The Galactic Empire, a massive and ruthless force that spans hundreds of star systems, had conquered and subdued countless civilizations over the centuries. Their influence was unchallenged, their fleets overwhelming, and their emperors were absolute. In their eyes, they were the pinnacle of power in the galaxy. But now, something new had appeared on the horizon: humans. Fresh out of their home system, they were quickly expanding into the stars, colonizing distant planets and exploring new frontiers. It wasn't long before the Empire took notice. At first, the humans were seen as little more than a curiosity, primitive, disorganized, and lacking the advanced technology that the Empire had mastered. But that view changed the moment the first contact was made. The Emperor, ever vigilant against any potential threat to his domain, ordered a diplomatic envoy to Earth, their homeworld, to establish a foothold and assess the humans. The emissaries were confident. They believed that, like countless others before them, the humans would be intimidated by the Empire's might. They would bend the knee, perhaps beg for peace, and swear loyalty to the Empire in exchange for protection. However, upon their arrival, the Empire's envoys were taken aback. Earth was not what they expected. The humans had developed technology far more advanced than the Empire had anticipated. They were not the primitive species the Empire thought they were, and the planet itself radiated a sense of fierce independence, something the Empire had never encountered before. The envoys, still believing they had the upper hand, presented their usual demands for submission and loyalty. But the response they received was far from what they imagined. The humans didn't cower or beg. Instead, their leaders, confident, resolute, and undeniably sure of their position, delivered a single message. It was simple, yet deeply unsettling. Run. The Imperial envoys were stunned. They couldn't quite process what they had just heard. It wasn't a plea for mercy, nor was it a surrender. It was a clear, unwavering demand that the most powerful force in the galaxy simply turn around and leave. The Empire's representatives scoffed at the message, dismissing it as a meaningless threat. Surely, the humans must be bluffing. What could they, a fledgling species, possibly do against the might of the Empire? But what the envoys failed to understand was the core of human nature: defiance. The humans were not afraid. They didn't fear the Empire's fleet, its weapons, or its centuries of domination. They had something that the Empire didn't fully grasp: an unshakable belief in their right to exist on their own terms. Back at the Empire's capital, the Emperor listened to the reports from his envoys. His initial reaction was one of disbelief. He scoffed at the idea of a species telling him to run. He had crushed civilizations with a mere flick of his hand, and now these humans, who had barely stepped beyond their own star system, dared to speak to him in such a manner. The Emperor's pride and arrogance led him to believe that the humans could be easily subdued. They had no experience with true power, no understanding of what it meant to be a part of the Empire. In his mind, there was no reason to take their words seriously. Yet, there was something about that message, about the tone behind it, that lingered in his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was overlooking something important. The Emperor ordered his fleet to prepare for an invasion, confident that the humans would crumble before the Empire's might. He expected them to fall in line, as so many others had done before. What he failed to realize, however, was that his decision to dismiss the humans' warning had already set the stage for the Empire's first major misstep. The Empire was about to discover just how wrong they were in underestimating humanity. The humans weren't simply a threat. They were a force unlike anything the Empire had encountered, and they had just been given the chance to prove it. The Galactic Empire, usually quick to crush any sign of rebellion, found itself facing an entirely new kind of challenge. The message from Earth had shaken them to the core. Never before had they encountered such an audacious demand. The Empire had spent centuries conquering worlds, bringing countless civilizations under their control, all without much resistance. But now this small, young species had dared to challenge them. The envoys returned with their report, and the Emperor was furious, his pride wounded. How dare a primitive species like humans speak to him in such a way? But beneath his fury, a small seed of intrigue was planted. Could these humans really be a threat? It was a question that gnawed at him as he paced in his grand chambers. The emperor's advisors gathered, offering different opinions on how to respond. Most of them, eager to prove the superiority of the empire, urged a swift and overwhelming military strike. They suggested sending a massive fleet of warships, enough to obliterate the humans in a single blow. With such power, they reasoned, Earth would fall into line, its people crushed beneath the weight of the Empire's might. But among the advisors, there were a few who urged caution. They had heard the humans' message loud and clear, and they understood its deeper meaning, defiance. These advisors warned that underestimating humanity would be a mistake, that the humans had shown an unexpected level of confidence and unity. However, the emperor was not swayed. He viewed these warnings as the ramblings of those too afraid to act. His decision was final. He would not be challenged, and the humans needed to be shown their place. With his mind made up, the emperor issued the order. A fleet of hundreds of warships was to be sent to Earth. It would be a demonstration of the Empire's unrivaled power. The fleet would sweep through space like a storm, leaving no room for the humans to fight back. Their cities would burn, their defenses shattered, and their world would become another jewel in the Empire's vast crown. The warships set course for Earth, their engines roaring to life as they sailed toward their target. It was a mission that would send a clear message across the galaxy. The Empire was unchallenged, and no one, especially not the humans, would stand in their way. What the Empire didn't realize, however, was that Earth was not as defenseless as they believed. While the humans had not yet developed weapons or technology that could rival the Empire's vast fleet, they had something far more dangerous: their ability to adapt. The humans had faced many challenges in their history: wars, plagues, invasions, and each time they had found a way to survive, to overcome. Now, facing the might of the Empire, they were doing what they did best: preparing. Behind the scenes, humanity was working tirelessly, developing new technologies and fortifying their defenses. They had begun to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the Empire's warships, and they knew the Empire was unlikely to expect anything less than total submission. Earth's scientists, engineers, and military leaders had already begun constructing a series of powerful weapons, designed not to win outright, but to survive and to make the Empire regret its overconfidence. Despite the odds stacked against them, the humans had something the Empire couldn't understand: their relentless resolve. The Empire's warships might be larger and more advanced, but the humans were driven by something far more powerful: the will to protect their home, their families, and their future. This spirit of resistance, of unity, was something the Empire couldn't foresee. The Empire, blinded by its own arrogance, had assumed Earth was a world ready to be conquered with ease. But the humans, in their quiet preparation, were readying themselves for a fight that would test the very foundations of the Empire's dominance. As the fleet of warships continued its journey to Earth, the tension built. The Empire's forces were confident, certain that their superiority would crush any resistance. But the humans, unbeknownst to them, were not waiting idly. With every passing day, their resolve grew stronger, and the first steps of their plan began to unfold. Soon, the Empire would come face to face with a force they had never imagined, and the results would be anything but predictable. As the Imperial fleet approached Earth, the tension in the air was palpable. The massive warships, each a symbol of the Empire's dominance, sliced through space like a blade heading for its target. The humans on Earth knew what was coming. They had received the warnings, they had seen the fleets approach, and now they were ready. With a calm resolve, humanity made its final move. Once again, their message rang out through the void: "We gave you a chance. Now run." This time, there was no room for doubt. The humans were serious. However, the Empire, secure in their belief of overwhelming superiority, simply laughed off the transmission. It was nothing more than a psychological trick, they assumed, a feeble attempt at intimidation. They couldn't have been more wrong. As the first ships of the Imperial fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, they expected to encounter little resistance. After all, Earth had only just begun its journey into the stars. How could a planet so new to the cosmos possibly pose a threat to an empire that had conquered entire galaxies? The Empire's commanders were confident, their warships already preparing to deploy their devastating weaponry. But as they descended into the atmosphere, something unexpected happened. Earth's defenses, though relatively primitive in comparison to the Empire's advanced technology, were not only functional, they were effective. The humans had been preparing for this moment, and they had done so with an ingenuity that the Empire never saw coming. Their scientists and engineers had worked tirelessly, secretly developing technologies that were far beyond anything the Empire had imagined. Powerful energy shields, designed to withstand even the mightiest blows, fled to life as the first Imperial ship came within range. The Empire's commanders watched in disbelief as their ship's weapons, designed to obliterate planets, collided with the shields and fizzled out. Earth was fighting back. The humans had also developed a fleet of advanced drones, small yet deadly, capable of maneuvering through the Empire's ships with incredible precision. These drones, which had been deployed from Earth's space stations, swooped through space like a swarm of bees, disabling Imperial warships one by one. It was a tactic the Empire had never encountered: small, agile craft attacking with speed and unpredictability, and they were proving to be a force to be reckoned with. But the fight didn't stop there. Earth's skies were soon filled with human-made fighters, ships designed for one purpose: defense. These fighters zipped through the air with precision, their weapons targeting key points on the approaching Imperial ships. The sheer number of these fighters overwhelmed the Imperial forces, who had expected to easily neutralize any threat. The Empire's commanders were thrown into disarray, their plans quickly unraveling. What they had anticipated to be a quick and easy victory was rapidly turning into a nightmare. On the ground, the situation was no different. The citizens of Earth, who had never expected to be caught in the midst of such a conflict, were quickly organizing. Militias sprang up across the world, people who had never held a weapon before now training to defend their homes. These citizens were not soldiers, but they were determined, and they quickly adapted to the situation. From large cities to small villages, groups of people banded together, creating makeshift defenses, preparing to fight. Every person, from the youngest to the oldest, knew what was at stake. The Empire, still convinced that Earth was a minor, unprepared planet, was now facing a full-scale resistance from an enemy they hadn't anticipated. Their initial wave of attacks faltered as Earth's defenses pushed them back, with each new challenge the Empire faced making it clear that the humans were not as easily defeated as they had assumed. Earth's people were proving to be more resilient, more creative, and more determined than anyone could have predicted. And the more the Imperial forces fought, the more they realized that this was not a battle they could win by brute force alone. The humans had something the Empire didn't: the ability to adapt and overcome, to fight with everything they had, even when the odds seemed impossible. As the battle in the sky raged on, the Emperor, back on his throne, finally began to understand the gravity of the situation. The Empire, once the unstoppable force of the galaxy, was now facing a power it could not comprehend, a force built on unity, resilience, and sheer human will. And Earth's message was clear: we gave you a chance. Now run. The Empire was not just fighting to conquer Earth. They were fighting for survival, and for the first time in centuries, they were not certain of victory. The Empire, still reeling from the unexpected resistance in space, made its next move. Convinced that Earth's defenders were nothing more than a fleeting nuisance, the Emperor ordered his ground forces to land and crush the humans once and for all. The plan was simple: deploy hundreds of thousands of soldiers, supported by massive war machines, and overwhelm Earth's cities. With their advanced weaponry and overwhelming numbers, the Empire was confident that humanity would break under the pressure. But the Empire had made a critical miscalculation. They were not prepared for the sheer unpredictability of humanity's tactics. As the Imperial forces touched down, expecting to face an unorganized, frightened civilian population, they were instead met with chaos. The humans, far from hiding, immediately launched a guerrilla campaign that took the Empire by surprise. They struck from the shadows, using the terrain to their advantage, setting traps in cities, forests, and even in the ruins of old buildings. The Empire's superior numbers and technology mattered little against an enemy that was so deeply committed to survival. The humans fought with a ferocity that the Empire had not anticipated, exploiting every weakness they could find. Buildings once thought to be safe havens for the Imperial soldiers became death traps as bombs, explosives, and hidden weapons were unleashed on them. The Empire's advanced war machines, towering metal giants designed to crush any opposition, were torn apart by unexpected tactics. Humans planted explosives, snuck behind enemy lines, and turned the Empire's own technology against them. The Imperial forces, used to facing uniform armies and predictable tactics, found themselves caught in an endless cycle of ambushes and surprise attacks. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The humans, with limited resources, were managing to outwit and outmaneuver a much larger, more powerful force. Each encounter taught the humans something new, and they adapted quickly, learning from their mistakes and refining their strategies. Their ability to improvise and adjust on the fly made them an unpredictable enemy, one that the Empire struggled to keep up with. As the fighting raged across Earth, cities turned into war zones. Once peaceful metropolises became battlegrounds, their streets filled with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. The Empire, expecting a quick victory, found itself bogged down in endless urban warfare. The humans were everywhere, hiding in plain sight, appearing when least expected, and disappearing just as quickly. What the Empire had assumed would be a fast, decisive strike had turned into a drawn-out conflict, one where the humans' determination and adaptability were proving to be the greatest weapons they had. Back on the Imperial command ship, the Emperor watched the reports with growing frustration. His forces, despite their technological superiority, were being pushed back at every turn. The once unquestioned might of the Empire was faltering against the ingenuity of a species they had underestimated. The Emperor, however, still believed that the Empire's forces would eventually prevail. He dismissed the human resistance as nothing more than a nuisance, convinced that once the full weight of his military was brought to bear, the humans would crumble. What he failed to understand was that the true strength of humanity lay not in their weapons or their technology, but in their spirit. The Emperor's pride and arrogance blinded him to the truth. As the battle continued, it became clear that Earth's defenders were not fighting for mere survival. They were fighting for something much deeper, their freedom. Each time an Imperial squadron was ambushed or their war machines destroyed, it was a testament to humanity's ability to rise above, to adapt, and to fight for what they believed in. The humans were not just resisting. They were creating a new way of warfare, one that the Empire could not predict or control. And as the battle stretched on, the Emperor's belief that his forces could overpower the humans began to crack. What he once thought of as an easy conquest had become an impossible quagmire. The Empire's superiority in numbers and firepower was no longer enough. The humans had proven that their greatest asset was not their technology, but their resilience. Each new victory for the humans sent a ripple of doubt through the Imperial ranks, and slowly, the reality began to set in. The Empire was facing a fight that would not be won with sheer force. The humans were showing them that victory could not always be measured by numbers alone. As the Empire's forces began to struggle to maintain their grit on Earth, the humans pushed back with an intensity that no one had anticipated. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, humanity had found ways to exploit the smallest weaknesses in the Empire's vast military might. They combined old-fashioned tactics, hit-and-run guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and deception, with their newly developed cutting-edge technology. The humans' ability to think outside the box and adapt quickly gave them a unique advantage. Slowly but surely, they began to breach the Imperial fleet's defenses. One by one, the Empire's ships, some of the largest and most powerful in the galaxy, began to take damage. What started as small hits grew into devastating blows, and the Empire's fleet began to lose its grip on the skies. The turning point came when Earth's forces, using a series of coordinated attacks, managed to cripple the Empire's flagship, the symbol of their dominance and power. The attack was unexpected, a move so clever that even the most seasoned Imperial commanders were caught off guard. The flagship, once thought to be invincible, was torn apart in a single well-placed strike. For the first time, the Empire's leadership realized just how vulnerable they were. The flagship was not just a ship, it was a symbol, a beacon of the Empire's unchallenged rule. And now it was in flames. The loss of the flagship sent shockwaves through the Imperial ranks, shaking their confidence to its core. The humans, who had been dismissed as primitive, had dealt a blow that the Empire couldn't ignore. As reports of the damage reached the Emperor, the once certain ruler found himself in uncharted territory. The arrogance that had guided him for so long was replaced with uncertainty. He stared at the holographic map of the battlefield, his fingers trembling as he traced the growing list of destroyed ships. He had underestimated the humans, but now he was forced to confront the reality. The Empire was not fighting a typical primitive species. No, they were facing something far more dangerous, a force of nature, unrelenting and determined, with the ability to adapt and overcome any obstacle in their path. In the Imperial Command Center, the advisors were frantic. They had never seen their emperor so rattled. Panic was beginning to set in as more and more Imperial ships were destroyed. They urged the emperor to cut his losses, to retreat before the entire fleet was annihilated. But the emperor, ever prideful and unwilling to admit defeat, rejected their counsel. To retreat would mean humiliation. To back down would be to show weakness, something he could not bear. His mind raced, his thoughts clouded by anger and desperation. He refused to let a lesser species defeat him. In a fit of rage, the emperor made a decision that would change everything. He ordered a full-scale orbital bombardment of Earth. He believed that if he couldn't conquer the planet, he would simply destroy it. With the power of the Empire's vast artillery, he hoped to wipe out humanity's last stand in one decisive blow. The Empire's ships, positioned above Earth, began to ready their weapons, preparing to unleash a storm of firepower on the planet below. The Emperor's mind was set. This was the final move. But the humans were ready. In the chaos of battle, they had been preparing for this very moment. Earth's forces had anticipated that the Empire would make such a move, and they had crafted a counteroffensive. Using a combination of the technology they had developed and the strategic knowledge they had gained from the ongoing conflict, they launched a surprise attack on the Empire's orbital fleet. The humans, with their adaptability, were able to exploit the vulnerabilities in the Empire's weapon systems, quickly turning the tide. The orbital bombardment was meant to be the Empire's decisive weapon, but instead it became their undoing. As the bombardment began, Earth's forces launched a series of coordinated strikes, crippling the Empire's ability to retaliate. Key power grids were taken down, communication systems were destroyed, and the once mighty Imperial warships began to fall from the sky. The Empire, once so confident in its invincibility, found itself in disarray, its power shattered in an instant. The humans had not only survived, they had turned the very weapon the Empire relied on into their greatest victory. In that moment, the Emperor's mind shattered. The humans, against all odds, had done the impossible. The tide had turned, and for the first time in his reign, the Emperor realized that the Empire was on the verge of defeat. His forces, weakened and crippled, could do little but retreat, leaving the humans victorious. What had begun as a calculated conquest had ended in ruin, and the Empire's power, once so immense, now seemed fragile and broken. As the final stages of the war unfolded, the Galactic Empire, once an unstoppable force, found itself crumbling at an unprecedented rate. The once mighty fleet that had threatened to conquer Earth was now a shattered remnant of its former glory, its ships scattered across the stars, picked off one by the relentless human resistance. The Empire's leadership was in disarray. The Emperor, who had once stood tall, a symbol of invincible power, was now a broken figure. His decision to bombard Earth in a desperate attempt to crush humanity had backfired spectacularly. Instead of obliterating the humans, it had fueled their resolve, and now the Empire was paying the price. On Earth, the celebrations of victory were bittersweet. The cost of the battle had been staggering. Entire cities lay in ruins, their once vibrant streets now empty and scarred by the horrors of war. The human toll was high, with countless lives lost in the struggle for survival. But the humans had proven something far more important, something that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. They would never bow to anyone. The defeat of the Empire had not only been a triumph of human resilience, but a powerful message to the stars. Humanity, once seen as weak and insignificant, had shattered the illusion of the Empire's invincibility. They had fought and won, against all odds, and their victory would resonate beyond the borders of Earth. As Earth's people began to rebuild and heal from the devastation, the Empire's leadership was quickly dissolving into chaos. The Emperor, realizing that his once great empire was lost, made the decision to flee. His empire, now fractured beyond repair, had no place for him anymore. His enemies, both within and outside the Empire, saw his failure as a signal to strike, and his once loyal officers abandoned him in droves. The Emperor, no longer the all-powerful ruler, was forced into hiding, a shadow of the man he once was. The empire that had stretched across entire star systems was now a dying beast, with its remaining forces scattered and leaderless. Across the galaxy, former imperial territories began to revolt. Worlds that had long been under the thumb of the Empire rose up in defiance, inspired by the human victory. The Empire's grip on the stars had loosened, its authority crumbling with each passing day. The remnants of the Imperial fleet, now leaderless and demoralized, were left to wander the galaxy, aimlessly trying to regroup but finding no place to call home. Planets that had once bowed to the emperors will now rebelled, and the idea of empire began to fade, replaced by a new era of uncertainty and revolution. For the first time in centuries, the stars felt free. The oppressive reign of the Empire was no longer the only truth in the galaxy. Humanity's victory over the Galactic Empire had opened a door to new possibilities, a future where the old order could no longer hold sway. The Empire had underestimated the humans, dismissed them as a passing nuisance, and now they stood as a beacon of defiance to anyone who wished to challenge the established powers of the galaxy. As word of Earth's victory spread, hope began to rise in the hearts of oppressed peoples across the stars. No longer would the Empire's iron fist reign supreme. Humanity had shown that even the greatest powers could be defeated, and now other civilizations that had once lived under the Empire's harsh rule saw the humans as a symbol of resistance. They saw what was possible when a people united against an unstoppable force. In the rubble of the Empire's collapse, something new was taking shape. The human victory had not just been about military might. It had been about something deeper: freedom, hope, and the belief that no one, no matter how powerful, could hold dominion over another. The Empire's fall marked the beginning of a new era, and humanity, once thought insignificant, now stood as a pillar of defiance in a galaxy that would never forget what they had accomplished. The Emperor may have fled, but the spark of rebellion he had ignited was far from extinguished. The galaxy would never be the same again. With the Empire in ruins, humanity stood on the precipice of a new beginning. The battle had been long and brutal, but Earth had survived, and in the process, so had humanity's spirit. The survivors, scarred by the war but resolute, began to rebuild their shattered cities. What had once been a planet caught in the jaws of destruction now began to flourish again, slowly but surely. Yet, The rebuilding was not only of buildings and infrastructure, it was the rebuilding of humanity's reputation across the galaxy. No longer viewed as a fledgling species that could easily be crushed, humanity had earned the respect of many, even from those who had once considered them insignificant. The story of how Earth, against all odds, had defeated the might of the Galactic Empire spread far and wide, and with it humanity's message. They would never bow to anyone. They had defended their freedom at all costs, and they would continue to do so. As humanity began its recovery, they found themselves forging alliances with other species, many of whom had once been oppressed under the Empire's rule. The galaxy, now in a state of flux with the Empire in disarray, was ripe for change. Planets that had once been crushed beneath the Empire's boot had risen, emboldened by humanity's victory. Old enemies of the Empire, once kept in check by its vast military might, now saw in humanity a kindred spirit. Earth had shown them that even the most oppressive forces could be toppled, and they were eager to stand alongside the humans, united by the shared belief in freedom and independence. What had started as a small victory for humanity had become a rallying cry for oppressed peoples everywhere. Through these alliances, humanity began to build not just a new world on Earth, but a new presence in the galaxy. No longer isolated or viewed as weak, they had become a symbol of hope and resilience. Together, the coalition of free peoples worked to ensure that the mistakes of the past, the tyranny and oppression of the Empire, would never be repeated. The spirit of defiance that had driven humanity to victory became the foundation of a new order, one where no species would ever again be subjugated. Earth had shown that the will to fight for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming odds, was a force stronger than any weapon or fleet. As the years passed, the galaxy began to look different. The oppressive reign of the Empire was a distant memory, and in its place stood a coalition of free civilizations, all united by a single truth. The strength of the individual and the collective lay not in numbers or technology, but in the unyielding spirit to defend freedom. Humanity's victory became the beacon that guided others, proving that even the most daunting adversities could be overcome. There would always be new challenges ahead, but humanity had proven that they would never back down from them. In the final reflection of this new era, one truth stood clear. Humanity's strength did not lie in the advanced technology they wielded or the size of their armies, but in their resolve. Their ability to face impossible odds and continue fighting, to adapt and learn, to never give in or surrender. That was their true power. The war with the Empire had been hard fought, but it had also taught humanity a deeper lesson. They were not alone in the universe, and more importantly, they had the power to shape their destiny. As humanity's eyes turned once again to the stars, they understood what their victory truly meant. It wasn't just about defeating a mighty empire. It was about sending a message that would echo through the cosmos. We warned you. Now you know. The galaxy would never forget the lesson humanity had taught. The era of the Galactic Empire was over, and the future was open for all those brave enough to stand against tyranny. Humanity, with its spirit of defiance and unyielding resolve, was ready to lead the charge into this new era. The stars were theirs to claim, and this time they would not be conquered.